These 8 brutal truths of Stoicism will change your life forever. Stoic life lessons. Stop for a moment. Just stop. Before you scroll, before you skip, before your mind jumps to the next thing on your list, I want you to actually be here for the next few minutes, because what we're about to talk about is not another productivity hack. It's not a motivational speech that fades by tomorrow morning. And it is certainly not a list of feel-good quotes designed to make you feel inspired for 20 minutes before you go back to the exact same patterns. What this is a confrontation. A confrontation with 8 truths that most people spend their entire lives running from. Truths that are uncomfortable, inconvenient, and in some cases deeply painful to face. But truths that, once you stop running and actually turn around to look at them, will give you something no motivational content ever could. Clarity. Real, unshakable, life-altering clarity. Think about the people around you. Think about the ones who seem to have everything. The career, the house, the relationship, the social media presence. And yet, if you look closely, something is missing. There's a restlessness behind their eyes, an anxiety they can't name, a feeling that no matter what they achieve, it's never quite enough. They celebrate the promotion for a week, and then the baseline resets and the hunger returns. They reach the destination they spent years chasing, and instead of satisfaction, they find only the next destination already forming on the horizon. And then think about the rare person, maybe you've met one, maybe you haven't, who has almost a magnetic stillness about them, who doesn't react to every provocation, who doesn't need constant validation, who can sit with silence without reaching for their phone, who faces difficulty without crumbling, who seems somehow to be at peace, not because their life is perfect, but because they have found something solid inside themselves, something that doesn't shift with circumstances, something that holds. What is the difference between those two types of people? In most cases, it comes down to philosophy. Specifically, it comes down to whether or not a person has ever seriously grappled with the fundamental questions of human existence. What do I control? How should I spend my time? What is truly worth wanting? Who do I want to be? And what kind of person am I becoming with each decision I make? These are the questions that Stoicism has been answering for over 2,000 years. Stoicism was born in Athens around 300 BC, founded by a man named Zeno of Citium, who, according to legend, arrived at philosophy after surviving a shipwreck that took everything he owned. He walked into a bookshop, read about Socrates, and asked where he could find a man like that. The answer changed the course of Western thought. It was later developed and refined by some of the most extraordinary human beings who ever lived. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled over the most powerful empire on earth, and spent his nights writing private journal entries about how to be a better man. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery, endured unimaginable hardship, and emerged with a philosophy so powerful that it has shaped thinkers, leaders, and warriors for centuries. Seneca, a playwright, a statesman, an advisor to emperors, who wrote letters to a friend that became one of the most widely read philosophical texts in all of human history. These were not ivory tower academics theorizing about life from a position of comfort. These were people who faced war, exile, slavery, loss, illness, betrayal, and death, and still chose to live with intention, dignity, and purpose. Their wisdom did not come from having easy lives. It came from navigating extraordinarily hard ones, and that is precisely why it endures. Philosophy born in comfort tends to crumble under pressure. Philosophy forged in hardship tends to hold. And today, we are going to take 8 of the most powerful, most brutal, most liberating lessons from that tradition and lay them out in front of you, not to make you feel good, but to make you think differently, to make you see clearly, to strip away the comfortable illusions that most of us carry without ever examining them. These 8 truths will challenge how you see control, how you relate to pain, how you value time, how you define wealth, how you understand yourself, and if you let them, truly let them in, they will change your life. Not because they are magical, but because they are true. And truth, even when it's hard, is always the beginning of something better. Stay until the end, because truth number 8 may be the most important thing you hear this entire year. Truth number 1, you control nothing but your mind. Let's begin at the very foundation. Before you can build anything meaningful, before you can develop resilience, find peace, live with purpose, you need to understand the single most important idea in all of Stoic philosophy, the idea that everything else is built upon. The idea that Epictetus, born a slave, discovered not in a library or a lecture hall but in the brutal school of lived suffering. It is called the dichotomy of control, and it is deceptively simple. Epictetus wrote in the opening lines of his Enchiridion, which means handbook, the following: "Some things are in our control and others not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, reputation, command, and in one word, whatever are not our own actions." Read that again, slowly, because every word matters. Things in your control: your opinions, your desires, your aversions, your actions, your inner world, your responses, your values, your effort, your attitude toward what happens to you. Things not in your control: your body, which can get sick, injured, or simply age despite your best efforts. Your reputation, which lives in the minds of other people, not in yours. External outcomes: whether you get the job, whether the relationship works, whether the project succeeds, whether the market goes up or down, the traffic, the weather, the economy, the way the person next to you decides to behave. None of it is fully yours to command. Now here is the question that will stop most people in their tracks. How much of your daily mental energy are you spending on things that are not in your control? Be honest. How many hours in the past week did you spend worrying about what someone thinks of you? Rehearsing arguments in your head for conversations that may never happen? Anxious about outcomes that haven't occurred yet and may never occur? Resentful about things that have already happened and cannot be changed? Angry at people for behaving in ways that are entirely consistent with who they have always been? All of that, every single second of it, is energy spent on things outside your control. And every second spent there is a second stolen from the only place your power actually lives, inside yourself. Here is what makes this particularly devastating in the modern world. We live in an age specifically engineered to make you feel like you need to control things you can't. Social media is built on the anxiety of comparison, the silent, corrosive feeling that other people's highlight reels somehow define your worth. News cycles are designed to keep you in a state of perpetual alarm about things happening thousands of miles away that you have absolutely no power to change. Advertising works by making you feel incomplete, as if one more purchase, one more achievement, one more external validation will finally be enough. The Stoics would look at the modern world and recognize it immediately. A sophisticated machine for directing your attention toward everything outside your control. And Epictetus, a man who was literally owned by another human being, who had no freedom, no property, no rights, looked at all of that and said, "None of it can touch what is truly mine." There is a story told about Epictetus and his master, a cruel man named Epaphroditus. One day Epaphroditus began twisting Epictetus's leg, apparently to demonstrate his power over his slave. Epictetus said calmly, "You are going to break it." Epaphroditus continued. The leg broke. Epictetus said, "Did I not tell you that you would break it?" No rage, no begging, no collapse. Just observation. Because Epictetus had already internalized something that most free men never discover. What another person does to your body is not the same as what they do to your mind. And the mind, that was his. Because what was truly his, what is truly yours, is the one thing no external force can ever fully reach: the way you choose to respond to what happens to you. Viktor Frankl, centuries later, discovered the same truth in a Nazi concentration camp. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." The Stoics knew this 2,000 years before Frankl proved it in the darkest conditions imaginable. Here is the practice. The next time something goes wrong, and something will go wrong probably today, before you react, before you spiral, before you catastrophize, ask yourself this single question. Is this in my control? If yes, act. Thoughtfully, decisively, with full energy. If no, release it. Not because you don't care, but because spending your energy there is like trying to stop the rain with your hands. It doesn't stop the rain, it just exhausts you. Do this consistently, and something extraordinary begins to happen. The world doesn't change, but your relationship to the world changes completely. And that shift, that internal repositioning, is what the Stoics mean when they talk about freedom. Not freedom from hardship, freedom within it. Truth number 2. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice. Before you react to that title, I know how it sounds. It sounds dismissive. It sounds like something someone who has never experienced real pain would say. It sounds frankly cold. So let me be absolutely clear before we go any further. The Stoics were not telling you to suppress your emotions. They were not telling you that grief is weakness, or that trauma doesn't matter, or that you should just get over it. That is a profound misreading of Stoic philosophy, and one that has unfortunately become common in pop culture versions of Stoicism. What they were saying is something far more nuanced and far more powerful. They were drawing a distinction between two very different experiences that we often conflate into one word: suffering. The first is pain, the raw, immediate, involuntary response to loss, injury, failure, or grief. This is biological. This is human. This is real. When someone you love dies, the pain that follows is not a choice. It is the cost of having loved. And the Stoics honored that completely. The second is prolonged suffering, the extended, often self-generated mental anguish that comes not from the event itself, but from the stories we tell ourselves about the event. The replaying of the wound, the catastrophizing, the identity we build around our victimhood, the narrative that says, because this happened to me, my life is ruined, I am broken, things will never be okay. That second kind of suffering, the Stoics argued, is not inevitable. It is constructed, and because it is constructed, it can be deconstructed. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Your estimate of it, your judgment about it, the meaning you have assigned to it." This is the Stoic insight that modern cognitive psychology has since confirmed in laboratory after laboratory. It is not events that disturb us, but our interpretations of events. This is the foundational premise of cognitive behavioral therapy, developed by Aaron Beck in the 1960s, and it is essentially Stoicism in clinical form. Therapists today teach patients to examine their automatic thoughts, the instant, unconscious narratives that spring up in response to difficult events. This is almost word for word what Epictetus was describing in the 1st century AD. Let me give you a concrete example. 2 people lose their jobs on the same day. Same company, same layoff, same circumstances. Person A experiences this as catastrophic. The story that runs in their head says, "This happened because I'm not good enough. I'll never find something this good again. I'm falling behind. People will think less of me. My life is off track." They spiral. They isolate. Weeks later, they are paralyzed. Person B experiences the same event as painful, genuinely painful, with real financial and emotional consequences. But the story they tell is different. This is hard. This is not what I wanted. And now I need to figure out what's next. They grieve the loss, then they move. Not because they feel better, but because they choose not to be consumed by the story. Same event. Radically different suffering. The difference is not personality. It is not privilege. It is not luck. It is the quality of the narrative each person is choosing, consciously or not, to tell themselves. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about things. And in another letter, the mind that is free from passion is a citadel, for a person has no fortress more secure to which they can retreat and remain unassailable. The practice here is not to pretend the pain isn't there. It is to watch the story you are telling about the pain, to notice when you have moved from experiencing the wound to living inside a narrative about the wound. Grieve what deserves to be grieved. Feel what is real. Process what needs to be processed. The Stoics were not robots. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote movingly about the loss of people he loved. He experienced grief. He honored it. And then he chose to continue. But there comes a moment, and only you will know when it arrives, when the pain has been honored, and what remains is a choice. Do I continue feeding this story, or do I choose differently? That moment, that precise, often quiet, often easily missed moment, is where your freedom begins. Truth number 3. Most people around you will never wake up. This is the truth that feels the most uncomfortable to say out loud, because it can so easily tip into arrogance, into the kind of smug self-congratulation that is the exact opposite of what Stoicism teaches. So let me frame it the way Marcus Aurelius did, because his framing is everything. He wrote, in what has become one of the most quoted passages of the Meditations, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Now, if you stop there, it sounds like the most cynical philosophy ever conceived. But Marcus doesn't stop there. He continues, "They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I feel angry at my relative or hate him. This is not arrogance. This is compassionate clarity." The Stoic understanding of human behavior begins with this. Most people, the vast overwhelming majority of people you will encounter in your life, are not acting from a place of examined values and conscious choices. They are acting from habit, fear, ego, conditioning, and unconscious drives they have never examined. They are not bad people. They are asleep people. Think about what that actually means. From the moment we are born, we are shaped by our families, who passed on their unexamined wounds and beliefs as if they were wisdom. By our schools, which taught us to memorize and comply rather than to question and think. By our cultures, which handed us a script, a ready-made set of values, goals, and definitions of success that most people never stop to interrogate. And now, in the digital age, by algorithms specifically designed to keep us reactive, emotional, and endlessly consuming. Most people live their entire lives inside that script without ever once stepping outside it and asking, is this actually what I believe? Is this actually what I want? Is this actually who I am? They chase the career that was expected of them, not the one that calls to them. They stay in the relationship because leaving feels scarier than staying. They suppress the questions that trouble them because the comfort of certainty is more appealing than the discomfort of truth. They numb themselves with screens, with substances, with busyness, with noise, because silence means having to face themselves. This is not a judgment. It is a description. It is, if we are being honest, a description of who most of us were at some point, and perhaps still are in some areas of our lives. The brutal truth is this: when you begin to wake up, when you start asking hard questions, choosing discomfort over ease, building character instead of image, you will feel profoundly alone. People who are still asleep do not always welcome the presence of someone who is waking up, not because they are malicious, but because your awakening is an implicit reminder of their sleepfulness, and that reminder is uncomfortable. So sometimes they will mock. Sometimes they will distance themselves. Sometimes they will tell you that you've changed, as if change were an accusation. Sometimes the people closest to you will be the most resistant. The Stoic response is not contempt, It is not superiority. It is not isolation. It is compassion at a distance. Love the person. Set the boundary. Understand their behavior without being controlled by it. Wish them well without waiting for them. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And this is the point. You cannot master yourself while spending your energy trying to change people who haven't asked to be changed. You cannot walk your path clearly while constantly looking back to see if others are following. Water your own garden. Walk your own path. And if someone else decides to wake up, be there to welcome them, because the door is never locked from the outside. It can only be opened from within. Truth number 4. Time is the only resource you can never get back. Seneca wrote an entire essay on this, and he opened it with what might be the single most confrontational sentence in the history of philosophical literature. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Sit with that. Not, life is too short. But, you are wasting it. He continues. Life is long if you know how to use it. And then he goes further. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is alien to us, time alone belongs to us. Think about what he's saying here. Money, you can earn it, lose it, earn it again. Health, you can lose it and sometimes recover it. Relationships, they can be rebuilt, repaired, rediscovered. Reputation, it can be destroyed and reconstructed. Even knowledge can be relearned, skills can be retrained, opportunities can resurface. But time moves in one direction only. Every second that passes is gone, permanently, irrevocably, forever. The minute you spent reading this sentence will never exist again. The hour you lost to a mindless scroll last night is not coming back. The years you spent in a job that drained you, a relationship that diminished you, a life you hadn't consciously chosen, those years have already been spent. And yet, how do you treat it? Be honest with yourself right now. Not the version of yourself you present to others, the actual you. How many hours in the past week did you spend on things that, on your deathbed, you would look back on with zero meaning? How much time went to scrolling through content that left you feeling empty? How much went to worrying about scenarios that never materialized? How many conversations did you have on autopilot, physically present, mentally somewhere else? How many moments with people you loved did you half experience because your phone was in your hand or your mind was somewhere else, entirely? Seneca described this pattern with devastating precision almost 2,000 years ago. People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. We lock our doors. We password protect our phones. We sign contracts to protect our money. And then we hand our hours, our irreplaceable, unrepeatable hours, to anyone and anything that asks for them, to notifications, to obligations we never questioned, to the expectations of people whose names we won't remember in 10 years, to the consumption of content designed not to enrich us, but to harvest our attention. The Stoic practice of memento mori, remember that you will die, was not designed to make you morbid. It was designed to make you present, to inject urgency into the ordinary moment, to remind you that the conversation you're having right now, the meal you're eating right now, the person sitting across from you right now, these are not guaranteed to be followed by more of the same. This moment is real. The next one is not yet promised. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not because the future doesn't matter, but because the future is built from present moments, and if you are never fully in the present moment, you are never fully building anything at all. You are assembling a future from half-lived instants and wondering why it feels hollow when you arrive." Here is a practice Seneca actually prescribed. At the end of each day, before sleep, review how you spent your time. Not to judge yourself with cruelty, but to see clearly. Ask 3 questions. What did I give my hours to today? Was that an exchange I'm proud of? And what will I do differently tomorrow? Do that every night for 1 week. Watch what changes. The time you have is not short. It is sufficient. If you stop hemorrhaging it on things that don't deserve it, the question is not whether you have enough time. The question is whether you are honest enough to use what you have. Truth number 5. Your comfort zone is your prison. Here is something that will sound strange coming from one of the wealthiest men in Rome. Seneca, advisor to emperors, owner of vast estates, a man of extraordinary privilege and comfort, voluntarily practiced poverty on a regular basis, not because he had to, not because of financial hardship, but because he understood something about the human mind that most people never discover. The mind that has never been tested by hardship is secretly terrified of hardship. And a mind ruled by secret terror is not a free mind. It is a mind that will make decisions, big, life-defining decisions, based not on what it truly wants, but on what it fears losing. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?' It is in times of security that the spirit should be preparing itself for difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favors on it, it should be fortifying itself against her rebuffs. This practice, voluntary discomfort, deliberate hardship, the intentional removal of comfort, is called ascesis in the Greek Stoic tradition. And it is one of the most countercultural, most powerful, and most necessary practices available to modern human beings. Because here is the brutal truth about comfort. It feels like safety, but it functions like a cage. The longer you stay comfortable, the smaller your world becomes. Not physically, psychologically. Every time you avoid a difficult conversation, that avoidance becomes slightly easier to choose next time. Every time you skip the hard workout, the couch becomes slightly more magnetic. Every time you choose the familiar over the challenging, the unfamiliar becomes slightly more frightening. Slowly, imperceptibly, the radius of what feels okay contracts, until the life you are living is not the life you chose, but the life that remained after everything uncomfortable was eliminated. Comfort left unchecked shrinks you. And the tragedy is that you rarely notice it happening. It doesn't feel like shrinking, that feels like living. Until the day you realize that the life you're living has become a very small, very safe, very carefully controlled container. And that container, no matter how comfortable, is a prison. Think about the areas of your own life where this is happening right now. Is there a conversation you've been avoiding for months, maybe years, because the discomfort of having it feels unbearable? Is there a career pivot you keep postponing because the security of the familiar is easier than the uncertainty of the new? Is there a creative project, a business idea, a relationship you need to leave or deepen that you keep putting off because staying where you are requires no risk and no vulnerability? That is your comfort zone, and that is your prison. The Stoics believed that a person who cannot function without comfort is a person who can be controlled, because whoever controls your comfort controls you. Whether that's a person, a company, a substance, or a habit, if you cannot be okay without it, you are its prisoner, and you will make compromises, moral, personal, relational, to protect access to that comfort. The antidote is not to live a life of permanent suffering. It is to voluntarily choose difficulty often enough that difficulty loses its power to terrify you. Take the cold shower, not because cold showers are magic, but because choosing discomfort first thing in the morning is a declaration to your nervous system. I am in charge here, not you. Fast occasionally, not because fasting is always necessary, but because proving to yourself that you can tolerate hunger without collapsing is an act of self-mastery that carries over into every other area of life. Have the hard conversation, not because it will be easy, but because the version of you who can have hard conversations is freer than the version who can't. Do the hard physical training. Sit in silence without entertainment for an extended period. Spend a weekend without your phone. Whatever your particular comfort addiction is, face it, deliberately, regularly. Every time you do, your prison walls push outward. Every time you choose voluntary discomfort, you are expanding the territory of your inner freedom. And eventually, you discover that the space inside you is far larger, far more resilient, far more capable than the comfort zone ever let you believe. Truth number 6, death is always watching. And that's a gift. We need to talk about death. I know. You don't want to. Nobody does. We live in a culture that has constructed an elaborate, almost comical infrastructure of denial around the one fact that is most certain about every single human life. We use euphemisms. We say someone passed or left us, as if death were a departure rather than an ending. We medicate the dying out of sight into hospitals and hospices, removing death from the natural fabric of daily life. We fill our days with so much noise and busyness that the thought barely has room to form. And when it does form, in the quiet moments, in the 3 o'clock in the morning moments, we reach for our phones. We swipe, we scroll, we bury it again. Because the alternative is sitting with the truth. You are going to die. Not metaphorically. Not eventually in some abstract future tense. You, your body, your memories, your voice, your plans, your worries, your ambitions, your identity as you currently experience it, will one day cease to exist in the form you know. The Stoics did not look away from this. They looked directly at it. Regularly, deliberately, on purpose. This practice is called memento mori, from the Latin, remember that you will die. And it is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in all of Stoic philosophy, because it sounds, on the surface, like an invitation to depression or nihilism. It is precisely the opposite. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." And in another passage, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." This is not despair. This is the most radical form of presence imaginable. When you truly internalize, not intellectually, but in your bones, that this moment will not come again, that the person in front of you will not always be there, that the opportunity you are postponing is not guaranteed tomorrow, something extraordinary happens. The trivial becomes clearly trivial. The grudge you've been nursing for years suddenly reveals itself for what it is, a waste of finite life. The dream you've been putting off suddenly feels not like something to defer, but something that demands action now. The people you love deserve not your distracted half-presence, but your full, undivided attention. The argument that seemed so important this morning suddenly looks different when you hold it up against the light of impermanence. The ancient Romans had a tradition worth knowing. When a Roman general returned from war in a triumph, riding through the streets of Rome to the cheers of the crowd at the absolute pinnacle of military glory, a slave would ride in the chariot behind him. And that slave's only job was to whisper continuously in the general's ear, "Memento mori, remember, you will die." Even at the moment of greatest triumph, even when the crowd was screaming your name, even when it felt like you had conquered the world. Why? Because the Romans understood what we have forgotten. Glory is temporary, power is temporary, youth is temporary, fame is temporary. The only thing that is not temporary is death, and the question of how you lived while you had the chance. There is a related Stoic practice called negative visualization, imagining in vivid detail the loss of the things you most value, not to torture yourself, but to counteract the insidious human tendency toward hedonic adaptation, the way we quickly take for granted everything we once desperately wanted. You prayed for the relationship you now resent. You worked for years for the career you now complain about. You yearned for the freedom you now waste. You longed for the body you now criticize. Negative visualization is the Stoic antidote. If you regularly imagine what it would feel like to lose the things that matter to you, you stop taking them for granted. Gratitude stops being a performance and becomes a genuine lived experience. The person across the breakfast table from you, imagine for a moment that they are gone. Not in a dark way. Just really feel what that absence would mean. Feel the silence where their voice would be. Now look at them again. That shift, that sudden flooding of appreciation, that recalibration of what matters, That is what memento mori is for. Death is not the enemy. Death is the teacher, the greatest teacher life offers. And the lesson it teaches every single day is this: stop waiting, start living. The time is now, because now is all you ever actually have. Truth number 7. Ego is the enemy of growth. Ask yourself something right now, and answer it honestly. When was the last time someone criticized you? Genuinely, substantively criticized your work, your thinking, your behavior, and your immediate, instinctive, unfiltered response was, "Thank you. I needed to hear that. Tell me more." If you're like most people, that is not how it went. Most of us, when criticized, feel something tighten in the chest, a flash of defensiveness, an immediate impulse to explain, justify, or counterattack. A sudden rehearsing of all the reasons the critic is wrong, all the context they are missing, all the ways their criticism reflects more on them than on you. That tightening, that defensive reflex, is the ego. And it is, the Stoics argued, one of the most consistent and destructive obstacles to human growth ever identified. Epictetus wrote, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these.'" Read that again. Not with defensiveness, with curiosity. What Epictetus is describing is a person so free from the need for external validation that criticism doesn't threaten them, not because they are perfect, but because they are not building their identity on other people's opinions. Their foundation is not made of approval, so disapproval cannot crack it. This is extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily powerful. We live in a world, more than any previous era, in which identity has become almost entirely social. We perform ourselves. We curate our images. We manage our impressions with the precision of marketing campaigns. We have built entire digital architectures for the primary purpose of controlling how others perceive us, and we measure our worth, consciously or not, in likes, followers, engagement, and the quality of the reactions we generate. And the cost of this, the hidden, devastating cost, is that we become increasingly unable to be honest with ourselves. Because honesty, real, uncomfortable, growth-producing honesty, requires being willing to see yourself clearly, to see your flaws not as threats to your image but as information, to see your failures not as attacks on your worth, but as data, to hear criticism not as an assault, but as potentially the most useful thing anyone has said to you all week. The ego cannot do this. The ego's primary function is protection of the self-image, and self-image protection is fundamentally incompatible with genuine self-development. You cannot grow in directions you refuse to look. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, by which no one was ever truly harmed. It is the person who continues in his self-deception and ignorance who is harmed." Here is a man who held absolute power, who could have had anyone executed for disagreeing with him, who could have surrounded himself with nothing but flattery and agreement, and who instead actively sought out correction, who wrote privately reminders to himself to remain humble, to remain honest, to remain open, because he understood that the person who protects their ego protects their limitations. Every time you get defensive, you are choosing your image over your growth. Every time you blame external factors for your failures, you are protecting the story that you are fine as you are, and the world is the problem. Every time you dismiss feedback without genuinely examining it, you are choosing comfort over truth. The Stoics made a critical distinction between two things we often confuse: reputation and character. Reputation is the image that exists in other people's minds. You cannot fully control it. You can influence it, but ultimately it lives elsewhere. It is built on perception, not reality. And chasing it means surrendering your power to external forces, forces you cannot ultimately govern. Character is what you actually are, in private, under pressure, when no one is watching, when there is no audience, when the only witness is yourself. And here is the brutal observation: Most of modern life is a competition of reputations. Social media, professional networking, dating apps, performance reviews, all of it rewards the management of appearances, not the development of character. We have built systems that incentivize performance over substance, consistency in public over integrity in private. The Stoic path requires a willingness to swim against that current. To ask not, how do I appear, but who am I actually? To judge yourself not by what others think of you, but by whether you are living in alignment with your stated values. This is harder than it sounds. It requires a kind of ongoing private honesty that is genuinely uncomfortable. It requires being willing to say in private with no audience, I was wrong. I handled that badly. I need to do better. Not for anyone else's approval, not for the caption, not for the performance, but because the quality of your inner life, the relationship you have with yourself in the quiet moments, in the honest moments, is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Build the kind of person you can actually respect when the room is empty and there is no one left to impress. Truth number 8. Virtue is the only true wealth. We have arrived at the deepest truth, the one that the entire Stoic system is ultimately pointing toward, and perhaps the one that will meet the most resistance from the modern mind, because it challenges, directly and without apology, almost everything the modern world has told you to want. The Stoics believed, and argued with logical rigor that has never been fully refuted, that there is exactly one good. One thing that is genuinely, unconditionally, reliably good. One thing that cannot be used for ill. One thing that cannot be taken from you by circumstance, by fortune, by other people, or by death itself. One thing that, when present, makes a life genuinely worth living, regardless of external circumstances. That one thing is virtue. Specifically, the 4 cardinal virtues of the Stoic tradition. Wisdom, the ability to distinguish what is truly good from what merely appears good. The capacity for sound judgment, clear thinking, and practical discernment in the face of complexity and ambiguity. Courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act rightly in the presence of fear. The ability to say the true thing, do the hard thing, and stand for what matters even when it costs you something real. Justice, the orientation toward the good of others, not only yourself. The recognition that we are social creatures, that our lives are deeply intertwined, and that how we treat others, especially when we have power over them, is the truest expression of who we are. Temperance, self-mastery, the ability to govern your desires, your impulses, your reactions, the capacity to say no to what feels good in the moment in service of what is actually good in the long run. The ability to hold the line between what you want and what you need. Everything else, no, and I mean everything, the Stoics classified as indifference: health, wealth, reputation, pleasure, comfort, status, beauty, popularity. These things are not evil. They can be preferable. They can make life more convenient. But they are not unconditionally good because they can be used well or badly, and they can be taken from you. A person can be wealthy and cruel, sick and virtuous. A person can be famous and empty, obscure and deeply alive. A person can have everything the world defines as success: the house, the car, the title, the following, the admiration, and feel nothing but hollowness at the center of it. And a person can have very little of what the world values and feel an unshakable, quiet, enduring sense of wholeness. What is the difference? Virtue. Now let me make this concrete, because virtue can sound abstract and dusty. Let me tell you a story. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man on earth. As Roman emperor, he commanded the largest military force in the known world, controlled more territory than any single leader before or after him for centuries, and had access to resources that most humans of his era could not imagine. He could have done anything. Anything at all. And what did he spend his private hours doing? Writing in a journal, never intended to be published, written for no audience whatsoever. Reminders to himself to be humble, to be patient with difficult people, to remember his mortality, to serve the common good, to resist the temptation of flattery, to keep his desires simple, to do his duty even when it was thankless and hard. His meditations are not the writings of a king enjoying his power. They are the writings of a man fighting every single day to be worthy of it. They are evidence that even at the summit of worldly achievement, the only battle that truly mattered to Marcus Aurelius was the one happening inside himself. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." Here is what strikes me most about that sentence. He didn't say, achieve more. He didn't say, acquire more. He didn't say, be admired more. He said, be one. Not perform goodness, not present goodness, not post goodness. Be it. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." And in another letter, "Virtue is the only true good. All else is an accessory. The things the world is currently selling you, the status symbols, the follower counts, the net worth figures, the title on your business card, the body that gets approved of on Instagram. The Stoics would not tell you these things are evil, but they would tell you with calm certainty that they will not save you. They cannot, because they are external. They fluctuate. They can be taken. And when they are gone, as they always eventually are, what remains is only you. What are you, when everything else is stripped away? The beautiful, terrifying, liberating truth is this: virtue is available to you right now, today, regardless of your circumstances, your resources, your past, your health, your bank account, or your history. You can choose wisdom in your next conversation, by listening more carefully, by thinking before reacting, by being willing to say, I don't know. You can choose courage in your next difficult decision, by doing the right thing even when the easy thing is right there. You can choose justice in how you treat the next person who needs something from you, by giving them your genuine attention and fairness rather than convenience. You can choose temperance in the next moment your impulses are pulling you somewhere you don't want to go, by pausing, breathing, and asking what the better version of you would do. The question is not whether you have access to virtue. You do. You always have. Epictetus, the slave, the man with literally nothing, had no money, no property, no freedom of movement. And he was, by any Stoic measure, one of the wealthiest human beings who ever lived, because he possessed in abundance the only wealth that cannot be confiscated, depreciated, or destroyed. The question is not whether you can afford virtue. You can, always. The question is whether you will choose it, in the next moment, in the next decision, in the next opportunity to be either the person you say you are, or the person you actually are. Those two people should be the same. The work of a lifetime is making sure they are. 8 truths, 2,000 years old, more urgent today than the day they were written. Let's bring them together one final time, not as a summary, but as a mirror. Truth number 1. You control nothing but your mind. Everything else is borrowed. Stop exhausting yourself fighting battles that were never yours to win. Focus your full energy on the one domain that is truly yours. Truth number 2. Pain will find you. It found Marcus Aurelius. It found Epictetus. It found Seneca. And it will find you. But suffering is built in the stories you tell yourself about the pain. You have more authorship over your inner life than you have ever been told. Truth number 3. Most people around you are sleepwalking, not evil, asleep. Meet them with compassion. Set your boundaries. Walk your path. And don't wait for permission from people who haven't woken up yet. Truth number 4. Time is the only resource you can never recover. Every hour you give to what doesn't matter is an hour taken from what does. Choose more carefully. Review honestly. Live with intention, not autopilot. Truth number 5. Comfort is a cage that disguises itself as security. The life you truly want requires the discomfort you keep avoiding. Step toward it, deliberately, regularly. Watch what you become. Truth number 6. Death is not the enemy. Death is the teacher. Let the awareness of your mortality make you more present, more purposeful, more grateful, more alive. Stop waiting, stop deferring. This moment is real. Truth Number 7. The ego protects your image at the cost of your growth. Build character, not reputation. Be honest with yourself in private. Be the person you respect when no one is watching, because that person is who you actually are. Truth Number 8. Virtue is the only wealth that lasts. Everything else, the money, the status, the applause, is borrowed and temporary. Who you are on the inside is the only thing that travels with you to the very end. These are not easy truths. They were never designed to be. Stoicism is not a philosophy for people who want to feel better without changing. It is a philosophy for people who are genuinely willing to look at themselves clearly and do the hard, quiet, daily, unglamorous work of becoming who they are capable of being. And here is what I want to leave you with. You will walk away from this video and re-enter your life. The notifications will resume. The demands will return. The noise will flood back in. The world will immediately begin competing for your attention, your energy, and your time. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, there will be a moment. Maybe a small one, maybe barely noticeable, where you have a choice between reaction and response, between comfort and growth, between ego and honesty, between the temporary and the enduring, between the person you've been and the person you are capable of becoming. In that moment, you will remember something. Maybe just a fragment. Maybe just a single line. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. And maybe, just maybe, you will choose differently than you would have before. That is enough. That is where it starts. Not in some grand dramatic transformation, but in one small, honest, courageous choice. And then another. And then another. That is Stoicism. Not a feeling. A practice. If this video moved something in you, if something shifted even slightly, leave a comment below and tell me which truth hit the hardest. I read every single comment. Everyone. If this video was worth your time, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not to change them. That's their journey. But because sometimes the right words at the right moment can open a door that changes everything. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. The work continues, it always does.